This is the Providence Early Learning Infrastructure and Support Program session. We are also kind of opening up the program today, so it's also the launch of the third year of this program. We are going to walk through an overview of the program, highlighting the process, but also specifically highlighting any changes from previous years. We'll talk about it a little later, but there are some differences this year based on the source of funds. It's not just coming from the city anymore. It's also coming from the city's allocation of federal dollars, which makes for a few different rules that we need to follow along the way. We will go through all of the requirements, the priority. We'll take a look at the application itself and take a walk through of each of the items needed for the application. And then again, we'll save time at the end so you can have some time for questions and answers. Okay, so we'll jump into our kind of a high level overview. We'll get into more of the details a little bit later. But about facilities. So the early care and education programming that you provide, we know is essential for family economic stability and for the healthy development of children during a really critical time of growth for them. So thoughtfully planned facility improvements can offer so many benefits. They can result in cost savings over time for your program. They can support sort of relieve some of those very physical challenges of the job, and can make also the learning goal, the care goal that you have for your children more attainable. So recognizing all of these important aspects of early learning and childcare and the services that you all provide, Providence has gone ahead and dedicated a third year of funding for the support of facilities improvements. This year, we have a little extra time. This is going to be a program that lasts for through 2024. It's over $1.5 million that's available for grants, and that's specifically for planning for facility improvements or expansion, repairs, and like small scale renovations to improve quality and safety. So again, the new cycle of funding does build upon two previous waves of grants, which maybe some of you have applied for in the past. These are similar, but we want to make sure that you know that because these are coming from American Rescue Plan dollars, which comes from the federal government, it does come with federal rules and regulations that make for a few key changes in the program. We tried to keep as much the same as possible, but we will definitely highlight those for you. And again, questions at any time, please let us know. Okay, so the use of funds. So improvements can be made to either indoor or outdoor spaces. The dollar amounts aren't capped for what you can request, but they do have to be based on estimates or past experience and how much something costs. It should be based on something. So ideally, that means estimates. If you're looking to make a purchase of something, that could mean, searching for that item in, wherever you get your like equipment and furnishings, but it has to be based on something because when we do award the grants, you will be reimbursed based on actual expenses incurred. So it is important to kind of have that that backup documentation of where the dollar amount you're requesting is coming from. So just to give a few examples of each of these types of grants, for planning, they can be used to develop a comprehensive indoor or outdoor facility plan. What that might look like could be hiring a professional to do an overall facilities assessment. That way you can help identify major health and safety concerns, develop a staged plan, what needs to happen first and foremost, and then should you get additional funding or raise additional funding along the way, what can happen next. You could hire an architect or another design professional to do a feasibility assessment. For example, if you are thinking of expanding your licensed capacity or moving to a new space, opening a second location, things like that, it's really important to hire someone to do that critical step of a feasibility study to make sure that that's a good fit for you. You could hire an architect to develop plans for making improvements to the facility to come into licensing compliance, improve another health and safety issue, or to support your movement up the Bright Stars quality tiers. If you have a facilities related barrier to kind of moving up in your scores, you could hire someone to help you plan for that type of change. And you could hire someone to make a playground plan for you. Again, this can be something that's staged so that you have a few elements you want to identify as your priority, your highest priority, and then what can happen next along the way. And then jumping into the second type, capital grants. So these can be used for small scale renovations that are addressing licensing compliance, health and safety, and other quality improvements. So in some cases, you might not need a planning grant, or maybe you have already gone through a planning process. So you can go straight to that capital grant. So that's where you would be able to hire a contractor to make some of those renovations. All right, so the availability of funds, again, is a little over $1.5 million. Those eligible for this are licensed child care providers serving infant through preschool aged children. This can include Head Starts, public school preschools, family childcare providers, and a note on family childcare providers. This year, we can accept sole proprietors. So if you are not an incorporated business, that is one change. So that's a positive change that we can now accept applications from more people. So just take note of that. And state pre-K classrooms. Funding is provided again by the City of Providence and Mayor Smiley, and it's coming from the city's local allocation of their federal ARPA dollars. So that's where kind of the Providence aspect of this is. You do have to be based in Providence to access this funding because it is specifically coming from the City of Providence for that purpose. And then the last item in this kind of overview that I'm giving before we get into the details is that this is a reimbursement-based program. And that is because it is federally funded now. That is a change from previous years. So I know there'll probably be questions around this, and that's fine. But what a reimbursement process means that you'll have to pay for the expenses upfront if you are awarded a grant. You'll have to show the proof of payment, which could be a canceled check or a receipt, and then we would reimburse you for those expenses. Now, we do have some flexibility that we've been able to get with the city, that if you can show us that you need the funds upfront and can't cover those costs, we can work with you to advance some funding a little bit at a time by meeting milestones. So just if that reimbursement could be an issue for you, I don't want that to hold you back from investigating whether you want to apply further, because we do have the ability to work with folks on that should you need a different setup. But it will be on a case-by-case basis, so we'll work with you one-on-one. Okay, with that, I will kick it over to my colleague, Pauline.
Thank you, Megan. So I'm Pauline Bellavance, and I believe I've probably talked to a number of the providers that are on the call today. And I'm just so pleased to be with the child care team again to help launch a new round of funding for programs that are specific, as Megan had mentioned, for facilities in the city of Providence. And I'm especially pleased to see several of our family care programs participating in this training session because I think it'll be very valuable for all of you. So next, we're going to discuss who's eligible to apply. Thanks, Megan. Okay, so who's eligible to apply? Questions you have to ask yourself are you licensed to provide childcare services? And is that license in good standing? Are you also in good standing in the state of Rhode Island? Um, are you Bright Stars rated? And are you actively working to improve that rating? And most importantly, I think, is are you providing services to children with high needs? And to reiterate what Megan said earlier, are you located in the city of Providence? And finally, with this program, you have to have an assigned unique entity ID. So many of you might be saying, okay, so what's a unique entity ID? So if you want to find out more about that, you can go to sam.gov, and it gives you a step-by-step process and how to apply for a unique entity ID. And if for some reason you're still not quite sure and it's a little bit confusing, which it can be for all of us, please don't hesitate to contact one of us, here at the LIST office, and we'll be happy to walk you through that. Okay, now the priorities for decision making. So here are a few, I think, key bullet points that we consider when we're looking at funding priorities. So I know we've mentioned before about enrolling substantial numbers of children with high needs. Um, and just so that you know, we do look for programs that are providing some type of matching funds for their project, and importantly, that they can demonstrate the capacity to manage the proposed project. And finally, we want programs that link to the compliance and the health and safety codes and regulations, and quality benchmarks. So I also want to mention, as many of you may already know, but just to reiterate, we have, many, guides and training tools for all of our center and home-based, facilities. So for example, if you want to read about how to access your capacity in our development and financing, we do have a development and financing guide. So, for example, think about your current program and obligations. Is there a plan to also meet the new demands of the facility project, along with the requirements of receiving government grant funding? So we're going to talk more about those requirements later in the presentation. So continuing with decision-making priorities, here are another few bullet points to take into consideration that we look at when we're deciding where you fall in our priority listings. So we look at programs that can demonstrate long-term site control. So by that we mean, do you own a building, or do you have a favorable long-term lease? Then we look at grant funds that address, as Megan had mentioned earlier, compliance with regulations, health and safety issues, the overall building condition, playground safety, and finally, physical space barriers to program quality and expansion. Next, Meg. So here are some examples of projects that will give you a better idea of what will or will not be funded. So on the left-hand side, we have several that you probably are familiar with, and I just kind of want to reiterate a few important ones, such as, your demonstrated commitment to quality. And do you have a history of personal investment, in your child care program? We certainly would be looking at urgent health and safety concerns. And Are there issues that you have regarding regulatory compliance? And is your project a fully baked project? Now, when I say fully baked, the first thing that comes to mind is grandma's blueberry pie, and you got that family recipe, and you have to look at all the ingredients, and you got to make sure that all of that is together. So at the end of the day, when it's fully baked, you're going to have an amazing pie to serve to your guests, and in this case, an amazing project to move forward, with your children. So on the next slide, we have project types that are not likely to be funded. Um, Specifically, no long-term site control. And we talked about that earlier regarding, whether it's a leased property or whether you own that. Does your plan, if it doesn't align to best practice, that probably would fall, a lower on our scaling process, which will scoring process that we'll talk about later. Um, do you have fiscal issues that might be a concern as you move through your project? How is your capacity to manage, the project or the grant? All of those things we take into consideration as we make those final decisions. So last, I also want to emphasize that large climbing structures, they're not needed by regulation and are not necessary for best practice in outdoor play. So those will not be funded by this grant process. So you may want to make a note right now not to include that in your proposal. So next, we're going to talk about how to pick your project. So we've talked about eligibility, we've talked about prioritizing. So now we're going to say, okay, what kind of a project do we want to, submit? So obviously, you would want to think about documented health and safety issues. You'd also want to look at facility issues that's impacting your Bright Stars rating or your ERS scores. And, if that program would expand quality program with necessary facility renovations. So keep in mind, though, that there may be funding opportunities that are a better fit for some of the projects that may not fit into these particular priorities. So if you're awarded grant funds to make a necessary health and safety improvement, for example, you could then use the money saved on the project to put towards one that might not be a good fit for the funding sources that are currently, available. So when thinking about the projects you'd like to complete in 2023, keep in mind the grant priority areas when choosing which project, to focus on your application. So, just because the priorities of this government funding doesn't meet our guidelines that we've set forth, it doesn't mean that it's an unimportant project, because I think all the projects are important. We just have to look at them based on the grant funding and the priorities that have been set forth. So we always have a lot more application for grant projects than we can fund, unfortunately. But I just want to speak again that the LIST team is always here to offer technical assistance, even if something isn't being funded. So don't get discouraged if you aren't funded. Keep working on that project, and that's what we're here for, to make sure that we can get you to that next step. Next slide, Megan. Okay. Perfect. Just want to make sure I'm on the right page here. Okay, just so that you know, like, any documented health and safety issues or physical space related barriers in your quality improvement plan are great places to start when funding opportunities like this, come around. So just want to make it an important note that documentation can make your application rise to the top when projects must be prioritized. So ask yourself, do you see health and safety concerns? How do the children move around the space? What would make supervision easier? Materials more accessible? Routines flow better? And you'll find that a checklist can be very helpful when you're trying to prioritize your project. And again, LISC has checklists for this purpose for both center-based and home-based providers, and we do have them in both English and Spanish. So for the purpose of this application and in the absence of documentation, a tool like this can be really helpful in prioritizing your project and supporting your requests for funds. And also, as you continue to grow with your facility, to plan out future improvements. Okay, next slide there, Megan. Thanks. So here's some examples of how to pick and prioritize, your project for capital playground funding. So look around your property, and we have given some examples on the right-hand side of the screen of projects that we have provided funding for repairs, such as fencing, on the two properties that you see here. And I just want to highlight the photo below, which is a perfect example of a funded program that was well thought out. Eligibility was meant, they prioritized and they had a great plan to move forward. So when you're thinking about capital program funding, are you thinking about the removal of unsafe equipment, repairing unsafe fencing? Are you thinking about putting sheds in for storage for loose parts, balls, hula hoops, that sort of thing? Are you thinking of an addition of age-appropriate activities and activity areas? And if you've met with a qualified professional and he's provided a consultation on improving safety, such as repairs or modification, um, and also thinking about possibly the installation of a shade structure, especially now as we're coming into the summer. And, I'm a firm believer in climate change. So we need to kind of protect those little kiddos, from that strong sun. All right, finally, we're going to end with project feasibility. So 2 key points here. Can the project realistically be completed before November of 2024? And realistically, can you complete it with the funding that's going to be available for you? So again, LISC does have a resource guide that could help you through this process in deciding project feasibility, and that's the Child Care Facilities Development and Financing, and that will provide guidance on testing project feasibility. And if you're not sure, again, I can't overemphasize enough how much technical assistance can be so valuable to you. And that is one of the things that we do best. So don't hesitate if you're not sure about your project feasibility to reach out to us, and we can talk you through that and maybe suggest applying for a planning grant that will help you through that critical feasibility stage. So again, just as a reminder, as you're putting together your timeline and you're working in your application, put a red mark on your calendar that you have to be completed by November of 2024. And as Megan had said earlier, fortunately, we do have more time for this round, but like anything else, factors do come into play that can cause delays. And if anyone has done a renovation of their kitchen, a renovation of their outside, and they say, yep, it's going to be done the end of May. Most of us probably know that June comes around and we're still working on that project. So it's always good to kind of make conservative assumptions, especially around the weather, and as we know through COVID, for example, there has been a lot of supply chain issues. So think about material lead times when you're putting together your timeline. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Erin, and she's going to talk about grant requirements. And I just wanted to wish you all luck when you put in your application. We're looking forward to reviewing them and working with you.
Thank you so much, Pauline.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in real quick because I don't know if I mentioned that these slides are going to be available on our website. Someone asked about that, so I just want to make sure that you all know the slides will be available in English and Spanish. Sorry, Erin.
No problem. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for that clarification. Hi, everyone. I am Erin Cox. I'm a senior program officer here at LISC. I also do a lot of technical assistance work directly related to building improvements. I'm very happy to see that I know many of the providers that are on this call and have worked directly with them. So I know that there are lots of people that are looking to improve their space, and use of these grant funds will be incredibly important and helpful. So with that, I'm going to quickly go into the grant requirements. In order to be considered for a grant, you will need to provide certain information. The first is a written estimate of each proposed project from either a contractor, a manufacturer, or a product representative. If you are looking to make significant improvements to your space, like adding walls, plumbing, or other forms of building construction, you may need to seek out professional design services to develop a plan for the space. That is something that you may also be able to utilize this grant funding for, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you are selected to receive grant funding, you must attempt to seek out 3 bids and document your selection process prior to beginning work. And if you are looking to make significant improvements to your space and you want to get a proposed cost, please know that you might need to request an estimate or a bid. And those two things are slightly different. An estimate is a close approximation of the price that will be charged to do a job based on the information that is available at the time of the estimate. That's typically provided for projects where plans aren't yet fully developed, but an estimate can be used to help you figure out a ballpark cost for the work in order to apply for grant funding. I also just want to mention that we're seeing construction costs kind of all over the place right now. So the more information that you can provide to someone upfront about the project, the closer the cost estimate will be to what the total cost of the project will end up being. We do recommend that you try to obtain 3 bids for any capital project that you may have prior to hiring anyone to ensure that you are receiving fair pricing. A bid is the actual price that a contractor states that they will charge to perform the work. And that's based on a well-defined scope or work plan that you have. And sometimes things happen and changes in the scope or work will impact the price. So we see this typically specified in the bid or in the quote. Now, you might not get a response from everybody that you reach out to, but we do recommend that you track any phone calls or emails that you send out when trying to engage someone to price out your project. This will be a requirement should you be awarded grant funding. When choosing a professional to work with, it's really important that the company has the appropriate licensure, they carry proper insurance, and that they follow all building codes and fire codes. If you are selected to receive a capital grant, the selected contractor has to follow the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Davis-Bacon Wage Act, and Rhode Island general law. So these are all prevailing wage laws. Davis-Bacon prevailing wage language has to be included in your contracts with the professionals that you hired in order to obtain this grant funding. Now, I know that's a lot of words and a lot of laws and a lot of regulations, but you don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of either the Fair Labor Standard Act, the Davis-Bacon Wage Act, or Rhode Island general law. You just need to make sure that your contractor understands that these requirements are necessary. When selecting a contractor, you will want to do the following. You'll want to visit the Contractors Registration and Licensing Board website, where you can access a list of licensed contractors throughout the state of Rhode Island. You will be able to look at contractors, you'll be able to look them up on this website based on a number of criteria, like the type of work that they do, the scope of work that they do, and where they're located. You'll also be able to check if their license is still valid. Some of the things that you will absolutely want to look for when you are on this website, or whether or not their license is current. The other thing that you want to look for is, can they be located and license confirmed on that registration board? Can they manage a Davis-Bacon, Rhode Island general law compliant project? 2 really big questions when you're starting to look for a contractor. Do they have experience with projects similar in size and type to yours? Do they have good references? We know specifically in childcare that many people are actually able to ask other childcare providers who they have utilized, because many people in the community have been able to do a lot of work and make recommendations, and contractors are becoming experts on some of the very specific childcare needs that there are around the state. And you'll want to make sure that they're just, aware of the local building codes, know who the building officials are, and can meet any requirements that are necessary. And then lastly, can they perform the construction in the way that's the least disruptive to your program? For example, during hours that are not when the program is in session. This is something that comes up a lot, especially because, we need to have approval from DHS to make sure that you can take on a construction project so that it's not impacting the health and safety of kiddos when they're on site. So odd hours are something that comes up every now and again. So please remember that all professionals you contact for estimates or bids must be aware that the project has to be Davis-Bacon compliant, and which means, again, that they'll be paying prevailing wages and will have reporting requirements that they track. This does impact the estimate or bid. We do see that prevailing wage requirements will increase the cost of a project, typically by 30% or so. Every professional hired must sign a dated written agreement for the work to be performed, and the written agreement must contain Davis-Bacon compliance language. And we can provide that to you. We have a template form that we can share that highlights all of the needs for Davis-Bacon regulation that you can have the contractor sign. If you don't have a written signed agreement with Davis-Bacon language, you may not receive grant funding for your capital project. So you just want to make sure that everyone is clear that this is required with these funds. So we talked a little bit about selecting a contractor, but now we want to chat a little bit about selecting a design professional for anybody who's not quite ready to take on a capital project, but has very specific planning needs for a future capital project. If you are applying for a planning grant, you will need to select a playground design professional, architect or landscape architect, or other design professional to help you with this process. You will want to look for individuals who have experience with similar projects, individuals with references from organizations like yours, and someone who you feel understands your vision for the space. Research is a really critical component to finding the right designer. You want to talk to others who have completed successful design projects. You can reach out to us to obtain a list of design professionals who have worked on childcare projects in the past. And you can definitely talk to people that you respect in the community about professionals that they have used for similar types of projects. One helpful hint is that once you have a list of professional designers and potential groups that you'd want to hire, go ahead and check out their websites and their social media pages. Often there are pictures of completed projects that you can review to determine if you like their final designs and the aesthetic appeals to you. If you are awarded a grant, there are a few other requirements that you will want to consider. The first is the retention period. Grantees must maintain documentation of all grant-related work and expenditures for a period of 10 years. So you'll want to have a good filing system in place for managing all of your documentation. There is project reporting required, so you will be required to provide us with monthly written project updates. You'll let LISC and the city come and tour the project site, and you will comply with potential requests for additional information regarding the project activities as needed. Grant documentation that you're going to want to maintain is copies of signed agreements of the grant funded work, That includes invoices, receipts, canceled checks, and bank statements. In addition to that, there are financial reports that show the revenue and expenditure of those grant funds. Any records of any signed financial reports for each disbursement request certifying the use of these funds and that they're true and accurate. And then records of your process for hiring a design professional or a contractor for grant funded work, which does include obtaining multiple bids and decision rationale. So you'll keep all of those things on hand, but you will also be sharing that information with us to ensure that you're meeting the requirements of the contract should you be awarded grant funds. This requirement and all others will be included in your written grant agreement. So there will be a written grant agreement that you will sign upon accepting an award. Grant files can be reviewed at any point by LISC, the city of Providence. And all grantees will have at least one monitoring review with LISC staff. And with that, to get to the fun part of thinking about the application, I will kick it back to Megan.
Thank you, Erin. I know this is like a lot of information. I just want to go back to what Pauline had mentioned about us being here to support you along the way through the application process, understanding any of these requirements. And if you are awarded a grant, we'll help you through meeting all of those other requirements as well. We just want to get this information out to you up front so you kind of have an idea of the things that are going to come along, but we will be with you along the way. So I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed by this. So a little walkthrough of the application. Just a couple of notes up front. The application is electronic. While we do have the questions available in a PDF document, that's for reference only to help you kind of gather information before you go into the electronic application. We recommend using either the Chrome or Edge web browsers. It will work in other web browsers, but it just works best, it looks best if you use Chrome or Edge. Again, the questions are available. I'll show you where those are. And you do have the option to save your application. If you're in the middle of it, you need to step away. We know you're busy. It can take a little while to complete this application. The only thing we want you to really remember is that we don't have the ability to retrieve anyone's passwords through this particular system. So make sure you keep your application or your password in a safe place. Otherwise, unfortunately, it will have you start over. So just a word of warning on that. Okay, before I bring us to the application and looking at these documents, there are some documents that you should complete before you go into the electronic application. And we have templates on the website. So I'll show you where you can pull those, complete these items, save them to your computer. And then when you go to do the electronic application, it's just a matter of uploading them and submitting. Okay, so bear with me for a moment while I bring us to our website. I'm just going to ask someone on the LISC team if you could just pop in the website address in case you don't already have it. Everything is here on our website. Hopefully you can see this. This is our homepage. So when you go to RICCELFF.org, this is what you'll see down in the bottom left corner, very tiny down here. Hopefully you can see this. There is a translate button. While we do have all of these documents translated into Spanish, the text on the web page itself is in English. So we have English, Portuguese, and Spanish. You can use those buttons as needed. Okay, so to start, you'll see we have a few different ways to access funding here. There's a button over here And then there's a button up in this top menu section here called Funding. Click on either of those. It will take you to this page. It's good to know this page is here because you can come back and check on it. We'll always list any open or upcoming opportunities here, as well as sharing it through our e-news. So you can see we have some planning grants. We have the Early Childhood Care and Education Capital Fund, and then the program we're focusing on today, which is the Providence Early Learning Infrastructure Support Program. So click on that third program. It has a little brief introduction of it, but then you're going to want to click here, read more, and apply. Okay, so this is where everything lives, and as of today, the Apply Now button is live, so you can access that. You can get started, take a look at it, gather your questions and reach out to us. But it's just, I'll skip over this because it's all the stuff we're going over today. But here in these bullet point items, you'll see we have a full description of the program. All of these eligibility and priority criteria we're talking about, as well as the application questions, can all be clicked on. You should have the option, mine is up here in the corner, to download this. You can print it. Again, it's for reference only, so don't use that as your application, but it's available in Spanish, so the Spanish version is here. So just click on that and you'll get the translated version. And then here, these last two bullets are the documents I was talking about that are required parts of the application that you'll have to upload. So when you click on this, it's going to come up as a Word document. So you can see down here on my screen, a Word document pops up. You might need to enable editing up in this yellow bar. And then you're going to want to go into this document and respond to each of these questions. So you can put a description of your program here. Doesn't have to be lengthy, just make sure that you are providing enough detail so that we can understand your goals with this project. And also another note is, and we'll go through this table later, you do have to complete this table at the bottom as well. So again, just make sure you're saving this onto your computer, someplace safe where you'll remember where it is so that you can upload it when you get to that part of the application. The second item is a cash flow form. So we do give you this template. You don't have to use it, but what it is we are asking for, oops, let me bring that back up. A month by month look at the income that you're expecting to have in future months. So it's February, we would change the current month to February. So you can see it takes you through 12 months of what you will expect to get in as far as parent pay, childcare assistance program, CCAP. What you can do is you can use your previous income. So you can look at your tax statements to kind of get information and an idea of what you might expect moving forward. The expenses portion of this, if you do use this form, is just one lump sum. So if you can see right up here, annual expenses, that's where you're going to put how much does it cost you to run this program over a 12-month period. So again, you can visit your business financials, which might be your tax forms, it might be your audits, your account reviews, to look at what was that your expense to operate this program. You'll fill it in there and it will automatically calculate. I won't go into too much detail here, but please do reach out if you need help with that. Okay, and then here is your Apply Now button. As we'll talk about in a little bit, they are due by March 31st. We do intend to notify people of award decisions by April 21st. Okay, and so with that, I'm just going to come to the application. This is what you will see when you click Apply Now. Here is where you will save your progress. And you can see that it is translated. So each question and each section will have a description in English, the question in English, followed by Spanish. When you do save your application, you're going to put in your email. Again, here is where you're going to want your password, and please save your password. It will send you an email. Sometimes this email goes to junk. I'm just pulling it up what it looked like when it came through on my email. So it's coming from something called form notification. It'll give you a link. You can click that link and it'll take you back to where you were when you last, see, I've done it a lot of times, but yours won't look like this. So that you can get back to where you were. And as you can see, I've started filling this in and everything is still there. So just a quick walkthrough, the name of your organization, the name of your program. Are you center-based, home-based, school-based? What type of business structure do you have? So are you a nonprofit? Are you a sole proprietor? This unique entity ID that Pauline had talked about, that's through sam.gov. It's a 12-digit number, letters and numbers. If you don't have one of those, they're free. You can sign up for one through sam.gov and we can help you through that process. A few more questions like Bright Stars. Are you participating in a state, do you operate a state pre-K classroom? Your address. Not only the name of the owner or the executive director of the program, but also who should we be reaching out to about this grant specifically. It might be the same person, but if you could just fill out both of those items and how we can reach you. All of these items that have a red asterisk after them are required. It won't let you move forward if you don't complete those. So when we get to enrollment, you'll see there are two sections. We want to know your licensed capacity, so how much you are licensed for, but also who do you actually have enrolled right now? So just a snapshot of where you are right at this moment, how many infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school-age kiddos you have. We'll also ask for a few details to kind of find out, those children who may have a higher risk, higher needs that are currently enrolled in your program. So you'll have to have that information available. If you don't know, that's okay. And you can put 0 for these so that it allows you to move forward. And some of these won't apply. If you're not serving early head, if you're not an early Head Start program, that's going to be a 0 and that's okay. Some of these questions about facility space, you'll select if it's owned, it's leased, or if there's some other situation which you can describe. Someone did ask about leased spaces. So what's a long-term lease? We can talk about that a little afterwards, but we do look for a lease that's multiple year or an owned space. Here is where you're going to select if you are asking for planning funds to hire that designer, that architect, or capital funds to hire a contractor. Depending on what you select, it'll give you a little description, a little reminder of what that's for. It'll give you a reminder about that Davis-Bacon Wage Act requirement. It'll ask you if you have a written estimate. Ideally you do, but if you're having trouble, just reach out to us. You'll put in your requested dollar amount. Again, there's no cap on this necessarily, but it should be based on an estimate on real costs. You'll select which age groups your project is impacting. If you have any other funding that you're able to contribute to this project, whether it's your own savings or fundraising, another grant you might be trying to obtain. If you do, that's a good thing, and you can enter that dollar amount here. A really brief summary of your project can go here, and it's really brief because in the narrative, you are going to have the opportunity to elaborate on that. So here we just have an example of, someone's trying to repair their fencing. And then select the categories. These are priority areas that we've talked through. Which priority areas are you hitting? Now, these are just some program assurances like, yes, I agree, I'm going to do these things. I am in compliance with these items. I agree to on-site site visits that we will coordinate with you. And you agree to report on the funds should you be awarded. So you have to click off each of them to show that you agree to each item, and that will allow you to go to the final page, which is the document upload. Again, this is where you're going to upload those required documents. So you have your cash flow projection. You see this blue button here. This is where you're going to choose your file. So I will say, I will select my cash projections here, open. And when that file name shows up here, cash projections, that's what I named it. You know that it's available. If you didn't already get the template and fill it out, which I recommend you do, but if you didn't, you can find it here again. There are links to the forms in English and Spanish. Again, here's that narrative document that we took a look at earlier, where you're talking about your program, giving a description of your project. Choose that file, and there, it'll show up. Those are the two required. So you'll see those two have the asterisk. These are where you're going to upload any other files that you think would be pertinent. This would be your estimate. If you have a monitoring visit from licensing that shows a facilities issue, those are all great things to upload here. So I'm just, for an example, I'm going to say I'm uploading my fencing estimate. And I'm going to upload my monitoring report that flagged that my fence is not meeting the regulations. If you have more attachments that you want to send us, you can send that to our email address, send it to the Child Care Facilities Fund team. You can send it to any one of your contacts here, and we'll make sure that it gets in the correct file. Okay, so at this point, you're just going to agree that what you submitted is true and accurate. Click here to agree. Oh, sorry. And then there's this one other totally voluntary, but it is helpful for us to keep track of who we are reaching. This is the socioeconomic data. You'll select your gender, race, ethnicity. Again, it is voluntary, but it is helpful information. So none of this is required. Sign your name and submit. I'm also just going to show you where this takes you. So you will get this message. Oops, and I apologize. That message has to be updated. But you will also get an email. And we'll check my email. Telling you that your application has been accepted. And it sometimes does go to your junk mail. Again, these emails do go to junk sometimes. I apologize for that. But make sure you're checking your spam folder, your junk email, to ensure that you're getting those emails. And you can reach out to us to confirm as well. If you are applying for multiple projects, can you guys still see my screen? Okay. If you're applying for multiple projects, just make sure that you're filling out 2 separate applications. You can apply for multiple projects for multiple locations. If you do have multiple locations, just please make sure you're giving us separate applications so we can keep track of those and have them scored separately. All right, turn it over to Erin.
Thank you, Megan. Megan, if you have a second, can you take a look at the note to, we have some people, just as a reminder, please put yourself on mute if you are not currently asking a question or speaking at the moment. Thank you so much. So with that, I just want to go back to one of the items that Megan had mentioned when she was talking about the grant narrative. In the application, you are going to be asked to provide additional information on the specific project or the specific issue that you're trying to address with the use of these grant funds. This allows you to highlight better details of the concern. It also lets you note what the regulation is as it relates to different standards and improvements. And it also shows us how the grant funds can be used to help you with this issue, as well as to address the amount of time it will take to complete the project. So, for example, here, if you were looking to install sinks in an infant and toddler classroom, you would provide information like this. So here you would actually be showing at the very top, it says, what is the specific capital or planning request? You note that you want to install sinks in the infant and toddler classroom. And then in this table, there are a couple of things that you want to include. The first is, what is the issue based on? Is it a specific regulation? Is it a quality improvement? Is it from the environmental rating scale? What is the issue based on? So how do you know that this is something that you need to improve? In the next column, you'll want to cite the specific licensing regulation, the environmental rating scale indicator, or if you're a state pre-K, the CECE standard that you're trying to address. What is the detail of the concern? How will this request be addressed? And how does this request actually help you meet the need of rectifying the issue or making an improvement? And then in the last column, what is the estimated time frame and the cost for this item? So you'll see, I'll just go over this first row. In order to install sinks in an infant and toddler classroom, this particular issue is based on the environmental rating scale. It's located under the ITER's health practices. And, the detail of the concern is that, hand washing is not attempted at the required times by adults, and that this request addresses the issue because installing an appropriate sink in the classroom will ensure that teachers have opportunities to wash hands at the required times. And then, in the estimated time frame and the cost for this item, you can, note that you've got an estimate of $17,000, and the work can begin April 10th, and it should take approximately 2 weeks to complete. Just want to go through one more example for a capital improvement for your outdoor space. Here, the particular issue is that you want to renovate or replace playground fencing on the south side of your playground in order to meet the 4-foot requirement. The issue is based on, maybe you went through Ride State Pre-K and got a CECE space checklist that noted that your fencing wasn't meeting the requirements. So your issue would be based on CECE. The specific licensing regulation or concern is that in the CECE guidelines, it is required that the space for outdoor gross motor play be enclosed by a 4-foot high fence. Now, that is also a regulation in the DHS childcare licensing regs, so you can include that as well. The detail of the concern is that, on the south side of the playground, there's a very old fence, and it has sunk into the ground to a height that is below that 48-inch or 4-foot requirement. In order, this request addresses the issue because renovation of the old fence to restore the height to 48 inches or installing a new fence will address this concern. So here there are actually two options. One is to repair the existing fence or to replace the new fence. So in the last column, under the estimated time frame and cost for this item, there are two options. The first is an $8,000 renovation that would take 3 days to complete, or a new installation of $18,000 that will take 1 week to complete, and work can begin as early as April 27th. So we are really looking for you guys to provide us some information that details the concern, how you plan to rectify the issue, and the time frame that it can be completed. so that we know what kind of capital improvement that you want to take on. The more information that you can provide, the better for us to be able to assess and review the request. And just as a quick reminder, I know that we went through it on the website when we did the quick walkthrough, but all applications will be accepted until the end of the business day on Friday, March 31st, 2023. So, you know, you have a little bit over a month to prepare to get that application in. That I will pass it along.
Is Kayla?
She is.
Sure.
It looks like, Kayla, you were on mute for a quick second.
Oh, no. Well, hello, everyone. Now that I'm unmuted, I'm Kayla Aruda. I am the program assistant for LISC and technical assistant specialist for the Rhode Island Child Care Facilities Fund. And I'm going to be reviewing some of the decision-making process for this grant. All right, so first, all online applications will be reviewed by LISC staff to ensure that they're all eligible and complete. Those eligible complete applications will then be evaluated by a review committee using a scoring rubric to guide the funding recommendation process. I'll be going through the elements of that scoring rubric in just a few minutes. But once the committee has made its recommendations, the City of Providence is going to give final award approval based on the results of that committee meeting. The key point here is to make sure that your application meets basic eligibility and is complete. If not, it'll hold up further review and potential funding. In addition to meeting your eligibility and priority criteria, recommendations will also be based on application clarity and completeness, a site assessment prior to the final decision.
Kayla? I'm so
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but you're going a little too speedy for the,
Oh, okay.
the interpretation.
All right, I'll start over on this slide. In addition to meeting eligibility and priority criteria, recommendations will also be based on application clarity and completeness, a site assessment prior to the final decision to award funding, and the availability of funding. Right, so I'm now going to go over the elements of the scoring rubric. Each eligible application will be evaluated on the following criteria, which will total 100 points. The organization that starts out with the organization has shown the ability to sustain this project in its overall operations. That's worth 25 points. The application has demonstrated project readiness, so that includes providing estimates for the scope of projects, any design plans where appropriate, a realistic timeline has been established, that's worth 25 points. Then the proposal clearly demonstrates how the project will have a specific and measurable impact on regulatory compliance, health and safety, and/or quality rating. That's worth 25 points. And then in the last section, our other priorities are all smaller points, but still significant, is the level to which applicant enrolls children with high needs. That's 10 points of your final score. Long-term site control is established, which was mentioned earlier, which would mean either renting or have a multi-year lease. That is worth 5 points. And then proposal of matching funds for the project is worth 5 points. And then if you are soliciting or including participation of business certified by the State Office of Diversity, Equity, and Opportunity, including design firms, construction companies, or development team members in the project, and that's worth 5 points. So partial points can be obtained in each of these categories because it is very difficult to compare facilities projects of the varying scopes and scales that will apply for this project. The scoring rubric is only one important component of the recommendations for funding. Environmental context will also be taken into consideration with all these applications. Right, so applications will be viewed by a committee of partners led by the City of Providence and the Rhode Island Child Care Facilities team. Site visits may be conducted virtually. Should you apply by Friday, March 31st deadline, you will be notified by the status of your application by Friday, April 21st. All right. So I know that we have taken you through a lot of information throughout this session, but I'm just going to give you a little overview about some of the additional resources that we have available to you.
Relax.
All right, if I could just remind everyone to please be on mute if you're not asking a question at this time. All right, so the biggest thing that we offer is LISC technical assistance. So if you are at any stage of this process or even just considering starting this process, please feel free to contact us. There's a brief electronic form to be completed on our website that's available in both English and Spanish. But once you contact us, we'll be able to support you through your project, either for this grant or other facilities related projects. We also have our facility project readiness worksheet that was mentioned earlier in this presentation, available in our development and financing guide. There are the site evaluation checklists, which Pauline mentioned earlier, for both center-based and home-based for providers, provided in English and Spanish. We have space planning worksheets, and then we also have loans and recoverable grants that I'll talk a little bit about on the next slide. All right, so LISC also offers a small pool of recoverable grant funds to support pre-development costs to qualified organizations looking to expand childcare for low-income families. Those recoverable grants are a very competitive pool of funds, but if you have any questions about those, feel free to reach out to us. We also have LISC loan program. If you're interested in learning more, there is a LISC small business lending for childcare providers recorded session that has supporting resources in English and Spanish available on the RICCFF website under training and events. Which Megan is doing a quick show of right there. So as you can see, you can view the session right there in both English and Spanish and access any of those supporting documents as well. And as always, please make sure that you're signed up for our e-news and visit the funding page of our website for more information and updates on funding opportunities. All right. And with that, just as a reminder, this session has been recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint presentations in both English and Spanish. As soon as the recording is available in Spanish, we'll be sharing that out as well. We're now going to stop the recording and open it up to questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat.